Now the question is survival. Is this the end of technological man?
Hi guys, so today I'm going to be looking at Richard Matheson and specifically I Am Legend. So I'm a huge fan of Richard Matheson. I think I've read all or almost all of his genre stuff, like the horror, fantasy, sci-fi stuff. I know he wrote westerns and mystery thrillers and things like that, but I think I'm pretty covered on the genre stuff, like the speculative fiction. But yeah, huge fan, and clearly the most famous thing he's done is I Am Legend. So just a quick background thing about Richard Matheson. So I first discovered him thanks to this show, The Twilight Zone. That's not a show, that's a book. But The Twilight Zone Companion is an awesome book about The Twilight Zone. I'm sure one day I'm going to do a video about The Twilight Zone. But in the meantime, this is a great book that goes through all the episodes, blah, 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 blah. But I first discovered Richard Matheson thanks to The Twilight Zone. So most of the episodes were written by Rod Serling, who created the show. But out of those writers that contributed to The Twilight Zone, Richard Matheson was the second one down. He did loads of them, and some of the best ones, I think, as well. And some of the most famous ones. So like Nightmare at 20,000 Feet, the one where the man thinks there's a gremlin on the end of the plane, on the end of a wing of a plane. That's Richard Matheson. So that was my introduction to him, and I immediately thought, oh, I need to look into this stuff. And he wrote many short stories, but he also wrote a couple of really famous books. The one that I'm not going to talk about much, but you may know, another great book is The Shrinking Man, which again was a great film that he wrote the screenplay for, called The Incredible Shrinking Man. It's a film in the 50s, I think, might be 59, 60, might be. No, I think it's the 50s. Anyway, The Incredible Shrinking Man. It's a brilliant film, and it's a really awesome book. And it's worth noting that he did have quite a close relationship with Hollywood. So many of his things were turned into films. Button was turned into a film relatively recently with Cameron Diaz in it, called The Box, I think it's called. Terrible version of a fantastic short story. And there is actually a much better version of that story in the 80s Twilight Zone, and that's a really cool idea as well. It's a brilliant story. And also he's had like Real Steel, the Hugh Jackman film, that's based on one of his stories. What Dreams May Come, I think it's Robin Williams, I think, is in that one. That's one of his books. And Stir of Echoes as well, Kevin Bacon, that's one of Richard Matheson's books as well. And he also wrote the screenplay for Steven Spielberg's first film, Duel. Duel as in D-U-E-L. It's a great film, and you can really see a lot of the directing techniques that he developed. But more importantly, really, it was the introduction of Spielberg through screenplay by Richard Matheson, which is cool. So he did write a lot of screenplays as well, and most famously, he wrote this novel, I Am Legend, which is an amazing novel. It's very easily one of my favourite novels, easily in my top 3 of all time. It's a horror science fiction novel, and we'll talk about it now.
Why can't they stand the sunlight? Why are they only seen at night?
So, I Am Legend. You may know of this story through the one of the 4 films that have been made of the book, or maybe you've seen more than one of the films. But what's really odd and a little bit frustrating is that despite the fact that there's been 4 films made of this book, none of the 4 films really do act as good adaptations of the book. So we still haven't had a film of the book, even though there have been 4 films based on this book. So there was a film in the 50s with Vincent Price in it called The Last Man on Earth, which is quite a good film, but lots of changes in it, and it hasn't got quite the tone and the sort of the essence of the book in a lot of ways. The Omega Man, a Charlton Heston film in the 70s. Charlton Heston was in some absolutely amazing science fiction films in the 70s, and this is one of them. The Omega Man. It's a good film, but again, not really that close to the book. You can see it's an adaptation of I Am Legend, but so many changes in it, you just think you've made a different film. But you can see the links. There's the Will Smith recent version, which was just called I Am Legend, and the publicity said it was going to be just like the book, but there are some really clear differences. There's a completely different ending, and considering the ending is really where the title comes from, it's a bit naff, and the tone is hugely shifted by the presence of a dog in the film all the way through it, which when you read the book you'll see that could have been done so much differently, and just in general it's got a different feel to it really. So if you read this and you've seen any of those films, or I Am Omega, which is an action film based on is his name Mark Damascus, I think his name is, he's kind of like a martial arts guy. I Am Omega is supposed to be based on this book. If you've seen any of those films, you still haven't really had this story, because it's so different to those films. So, I Am Legend, the book. Last Man on Earth kind of story. So we may be familiar with those things now, but it was quite unusual at the time. There is an old Mary Shelley book called The Last Man, which is a post-apocalyptic thing. And clearly that kind of trope goes way back. But it was very unusual, and this is like a real important, significant, influential version of that trope. So Last Man on Earth, everyone has been turned into one of two things. Either these vampires that are trying to goad the main character, Robert Neville, out of his house at night, or there's this mix of like a vampire, undead kind of creature that's kind of like seems to be the new human that is kind of being produced out of this virus that happened. So these two creatures, these two monsters, are what Robert Neville, the main character, is facing, and he spends all of the book trying to find some kind of cure, some kind of explanation, something scientific that he can see as some kind of scientific hope that things can change, because everything's so despairing for him. He's on his own. He's constantly having to repair his house from the night attacks where they're trying to get him out, and they keep calling him out at night, which is a really creepy and fantastic element to the book. They're shouting Neville, Neville, Neville at night, and the women are kind of the women vampires are sort of trying to goad him out with kind of sort of flirty sexual kind of teasing to try and get him out, and he's resisting all of that. He's weaponized. He's hoping to kind of protect himself at night and protect his house. And in the daytime, when they're not around, he's going out for supplies. He's trying to fix his house. He's also spending a lot of time trying to find his cure and trying to see if he can change the situation that he's in, and that the world's in, and that humanity's in. So all those things are happening, but within that, you've got this amazing text which is full of despair. It's full of the isolation that he feels. It's full of the frustration. It's a really big part of it, the frustration that he feels. You can see he sort of lashes out sometimes when something doesn't go right in his research, or something doesn't pan out, or there's a great bit near the beginning where something goes wrong for him, and he's got to react. And the heartbreak in some bits. There's two really major points in the story where there's really heartbreaking moments, and you really feel for him, because he may not be someone that you would particularly identify with, but I think with the situation and the way it's written, you do feel for him, and you can see that it's a very despairing situation. So that's a major part. The atmosphere, the tone of the book. So one of the criticisms I've seen recently, I never really saw this until recently, but I think it's a sign of the times a little bit, is sometimes the book's criticised now for Robert Neville's kind of sexual frustration and the fact that he misses sexual contact with women and he misses women, and that idea of sexualizing women within his frustration is sometimes criticised. But I don't know. I mean, if you were the last man on earth and you felt like that kind of side of your life was gone, I can see why that might be put into the narrative. Richard Matheson in his other books doesn't really make that a big thing, but for Robert Neville it is. So I think it's just something that he decided to put into the character to emphasise his loneliness, his isolation, and that idea that he's the last man. So I think it works for the plot, it works for the atmosphere in the book, and I don't really think it's a negative thing really, but some people have said it's a negative thing because they feel like the way he talks about what he misses with women is somehow derogatory, but it isn't. But I think it's very difficult to fault this. I think it's just beautifully written. It's got an amazing ending. It's got lots of the pace is very fast. It's doesn't really some books that have got this despair and this loneliness and this isolation can drag on a bit, and you just think, yeah, get to the point. But it's a very short book, and not only is it a short book, but there's always something happening, and there's not every new chapter develops the story and develops his position, and it could be just the build-up of this frustration where he's trying to find out how he can cure these vampires. It's just such a powerful, brilliantly written book, and like I said, it won't take you long and you'll love it if you haven't read it already. And if you've seen the films and you're curious, it's a very different story if you've seen any of the films. So I would recommend it, even if you think you've seen the story through the films. The other thing is there's an awesome graphic novel that you can get. So it was originally in 4 parts, and it was then made into a trade paperback, which is this trade paperback here, which is fantastic, and it's written by, or illustrated by, and written by, I think, Steve Niles. Steve Niles you might know from the film and the comic or graphic novel 30 Days of Night. So this is I like the way he illustrates stuff. It's really cool, but it really is close to the book. So if you do want to see a graphic novel adaptation of the book, then you do get a really good version there. So that's worth looking at as well if you're curious. But yeah, as I said, couldn't recommend this highly enough. Fantastic book, I Am Legend. Check it out.